it was $20, and I was playing pretty good, and guys talked me into it because I was beating everybody. I mean, everybody I played with, I beat. I mean, I played Tennyson Park. When you talk about golf and you talk about what I've achieved, my memory's pretty good. Other than that, I don't. If it's not important, I don't remember it.
For a guy who trash-talked everyone and joked his way around every golf course in America, there were only 7 golfers Lee Trevino actually respected. 7. Not 10, not 20. 7. The man who grew up in a 3-room shack with no plumbing in East Dallas, whose grandfather was a gravedigger, who learned golf hustling money games where the stakes were grocery money, not trophies. He didn't hand out respect like participation ribbons. When Trevino respected you, it meant something. It meant you had what he valued most: the ability to strike a golf ball with absolute authority, to survive impossible situations, and to outwork the sun itself. These 7 names represent pieces of Trevino's own soul, the qualities he either mastered or desperately wanted to master. Let me show you who made the cut and why each one earned their place in the pantheon of the Merry Mex. First up is Jack Nicklaus, and if you want to understand Trevino's entire career, you need to understand this rivalry. In the ecosystem of 1970s golf, Nicklaus was the apex predator, the golden bear, the guy everybody feared, but not Trevino. For Trevino, Nicklaus was the benchmark, the standard he had to measure himself against. Trevino respected Nicklaus because beating him was the only way to prove he belonged. He famously defeated Nicklaus in 4 major championships, and that statistic became his armor against any doubt about his place in history. The most important victory came at the 1971 U.S. Open at Marion Golf Club. They went to an 18-hole playoff, and the contrast was perfect. Nicklaus, the establishment icon with the classical high fade, versus Trevino, the chatty public course hustler with the laser low trajectory. Trevino won 68-71, and afterward, he said that beating Nicklaus in that playoff made him feel he really belonged. That admission reveals everything. Validity could only be granted by the best. But Trevino's respect for Nicklaus went beyond just winning. He admired how Nicklaus approached shot shaping. Trevino observed that Nicklaus liked to curve the ball by opening or closing the club face at address. This sounds simple, but it reveals Nicklaus's fundamental soundness. He didn't need to reroute his swing path. He just altered the face and trusted his mechanics. And Nicklaus respected Trevino right back, calling Lee Trevino the best hitter he ever saw. In professional golf, being called a hitter by Nicklaus means something specific. It refers to the violence and precision of the club ball collision. The 1972 Open Championship at Muirfield solidified everything. Trevino chipped in repeatedly and denied Nicklaus the calendar Grand Slam. Trevino realized that to beat Nicklaus, you had to break his will, because his game had no weaknesses. That's why Nicklaus stands at the top of Trevino's list. If you're enjoying this breakdown of Trevino's inner circle, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me which of these 7 golfers you think was the most skilled. Now let's talk about Sam Snead, because while Nicklaus was the benchmark for winning, Sam Snead was Trevino's benchmark for the art of the swing. Trevino has consistently named Sam Snead the best ball striker of all time. In golf language, this distinction is huge. Ball striking isolates the quality of contact, the consistency of flight, and the purity of sound. Trevino focused intensely on Snead's incredible smooth and natural rhythm. Trevino's own swing was staccato and punchy, driven by aggressive rotation. When he watched Snead's fluid, syrupy motion, he felt both awe and envy. He said that day in and day out, no one could hit the ball like Sam Snead. But here's what really convinced Trevino: Snead's longevity. Snead won PGA Tour events across multiple decades and remained competitive well into his 60s. Trevino saw Snead as the template for golfing endurance. He attributed Snead's longevity directly to his mechanics. A swing that's smooth doesn't destroy the body. Both men favored a fade, but they achieved it differently. Snead played from a closed stance and cleared his hips to hold off the release. Trevino played from an incredibly open stance and blocked the club face through impact. Despite these differences, Trevino recognized that Snead's impact position was the holy grail. Trevino also respected Snead as a bridge to the earlier era of golf, the era of Hogan and Nelson. And then there was Snead's athleticism. The man could kick the top of a door frame well into middle age. Trevino also marveled at Snead's ability to hit long irons with the trajectory of a short iron. Snead could launch the ball high and soft, despite the primitive equipment of his era. That ability baffled and delighted Trevino. Snead proved that the perfect swing wasn't just about power. It was about rhythm, efficiency, and making difficult shots look easy. Next is Ben Hogan, and if Snead was the natural, Hogan was the mechanic. Trevino's respect for Hogan is rooted in their shared identity as men who dug their secrets out of the dirt. Trevino revered Hogan as the master of iron play. This connection runs deep. Both men were Texans, both were smaller in stature, and both survived devastating physical setbacks. Hogan had his car accident. Trevino had his lightning strike and back surgeries. But the deepest bond was their shared hatred of the hook. Hogan spent the early part of his career fighting a hook that threatened to drive him out of the game. He famously found a secret that allowed him to eliminate the left side of the course. Trevino's entire game was built on the same principle. You can talk to a fade, but a hook won't listen. Trevino respected Hogan's unwavering focus and work ethic. Hogan was legendary for his practice sessions. He would hit balls until his hands bled. Trevino, who would hit hundreds of balls a day even during tournaments, saw in Hogan the ultimate validation of hard work. Trevino said that ball striking comes from tremendous confidence, and confidence comes from working extremely hard. This is a direct echo of the Hogan ethos. Trevino recognized that Hogan's genius was the product of relentless industrial-scale repetition. For a player like Trevino, who had no formal training, Hogan was proof that a man could build a world-beating swing through sheer force of will. Technical analysts compared Trevino's ball flight to Hogan's, calling it the best ball flight since Ben Hogan. Trevino admired how Hogan compressed the golf ball, de-lofting the club at impact to create a penetrating flight that bored through the Texas wind. Trevino's respect for Hogan was also tinged with distance. Hogan was notoriously cold and often ignored competitors to maintain focus. Trevino, the Merry Mex, who chattered constantly, was the polar opposite. Yet Trevino respected Hogan's silence because he understood it was a shield for the intense concentration required. There's also the Triple Crown connection. In 1953, Hogan won the Masters, US Open, and Open Championship. In 1971, Trevino won the US Open, the Open Championship, and the Canadian Open in a span of weeks. Trevino understood the toll of such a streak, deepening his reverence for the man who did it first. Now we get to Mo Norman, the outlier on this list. Mo Norman was not a major champion. He wasn't a household name, yet Trevino's respect for him was loud and consistent. Trevino praised Mo Norman as a mechanical genius, and the best ball striker he ever saw come down the pike. This endorsement elevated Norman from a Canadian curiosity to a legend of the game. Trevino saw past Norman's eccentricities and focused entirely on the geometry of his clubhead. Trevino called him a really great iron player with unparalleled consistency. Norman's swing was famously idiosyncratic. He used a single plane where the club shaft and his arms formed a straight line at address. This eliminated many variables that cause errors in a traditional swing. Trevino, who also used a highly unconventional swing, respected Norman's refusal to conform to aesthetic norms in favor of functional perfection. Trevino often described Norman's ball flight as if it were traveling through a pipeline. He marveled at Norman's ability to hit ball after ball through the same window in the sky, a feat that even Nicklaus or Hogan might struggle to match in pure repetition. But Trevino's respect for Norman was also an act of validation for the outsider. Trevino knew what it felt like to be dismissed by the establishment. Norman suffered from social anxiety and was often bullied by the tour elite. He found a champion in Trevino. By placing Norman on his list, Trevino was making a statement. Golf is not about how you look. It's about what the ball does. In Mo Norman, Trevino saw the ultimate purity of the game, a man who played not for money or fame, but for the sheer joy of seeing a ball fly straight. Now let's talk about Seve Ballesteros, because if Hogan and Norman represented the science of golf, Seve represented the magic. Trevino revered Seve for his imagination and recovery skills. He famously called Seve the best trouble shot player who ever lived. Trevino was a control player. His game was built on avoiding trouble. Seve was often wild off the tee, spraying drives into car parks, forests, and bleachers. Trevino respected Seve not for the errors, but for the miraculous recoveries. He said it didn't matter how far in the woods you put that guy, he'd find a way to get out. But Trevino's respect for Seve came with a warning that reveals his pragmatic nature. He noted that Seve inadvertently put a lot of big numbers on the scorecards of average players because he inspired them to take dumb chances. This insight is brilliant. Trevino recognized that Seve's genius was inimitable. He respected Seve's ability to see a window of opportunity where others saw only a wall of trees. However, Trevino also understood the statistical absurdity of the shots Seve attempted. For Trevino, who calculated odds like a gambler, Seve's game was a high-wire act that he admired from the safety of the fairway. Seve possessed hands that rivaled Chichi Rodriguez. Trevino admired Seve's short game, particularly his ability to play from bunkers and tight lies around the green. While Trevino spent his life perfecting a mechanical move to produce a specific flight, Seve relied on visualization. Trevino respected this right-brained approach to golf. He acknowledged that Seve had access to a creative reservoir that most players, including himself, did not. Seve could invent shots on the fly, hooks from his knees, slices around barns, shots that Trevino would never attempt but deeply appreciated as art. Chichi Rodriguez is often remembered as the clown prince of golf, famous for his matador sword dance celebrations. But Lee Trevino respected him for a far more serious reason: his dexterity. Trevino stated that Chichi had as good a pair of hands as anybody he ever saw. In the era of the balata ball, which spun aggressively and curved easily, having good hands was the ultimate compliment. It meant a player could manipulate the club face through impact to create any spin or trajectory required. Trevino claimed Rodriguez had more shots than you can imagine, but Trevino's praise came with a caveat. He noted that Chichi had a habit of turning simple shots into difficult ones. This suggests Rodriguez's immense talent sometimes worked against him. Because he could hit a miraculous fade around a tree, he might try it instead of chipping out. Trevino, who preferred the easy shot, respected Rodriguez's ability to execute the difficult one. This dynamic defined their relationship on the senior tour, where they were the two biggest draws. They were both showmen who understood that professional golf was part sport, part entertainment. Like Trevino, Rodriguez came from extreme poverty in Puerto Rico and worked his way up from the caddy ranks. Trevino respected Rodriguez's hustle and his ability to use golf as a vehicle out of poverty. They shared a bond of the self-made. Trevino's respect for Chi-Chi was recognition of a fellow survivor who never lost his joy for the game, despite the hardships. Finally, we have Gary Player, the Black Knight from South Africa. Player earned Trevino's respect through sheer sweat equity. Trevino admired Player's determination and work ethic, respecting him as someone who achieved greatness through sheer hard work. Trevino and Player were both smaller men in a game increasingly dominated by power hitters like Nicholas. Trevino respected that Player compensated for his size with unparalleled physical fitness. Player was a pioneer in treating golf as an athletic endeavor. He performed fingertip push-ups and obsessed over diet long before the Tiger Woods era. Trevino noted that Player outworked everybody. Trevino respected Player's tenacity. He saw Player as a dog without a bone when he got near the lead. This grinder mentality resonated with Trevino. Neither man expected the game to be easy. They expected it to be a fight. Player's philosophy, often summarized as the harder you practice, the luckier you get, perfectly encapsulates what Trevino respected. Trevino knew that Player's 9 major championships were not divine intervention, but thousands of hours in bunkers and on practice tees. Trevino also respected Player's global hustle. Player traveled millions of miles to compete, winning titles on every continent. Trevino understood the toll of travel. He respected Player's willingness to go anywhere and beat anyone. The 1974 PGA Championship provides a key intersection. Trevino won, but he battled Player and Nicholas to do it. These battles solidified Trevino's view of Player as a warrior. Trevino saw in Player the ultimate professional, a man who left no stone unturned. So what does this list tell us about Lee Trevino himself? When you look at these 7 names together, you see a blueprint of Trevino's values. He didn't respect these men because they were famous or wealthy. He respected them because they possessed specific traits that Trevino held as the truths of golf. Ball striking came first. Snead, Hogan, and Norman represented the art of hitting the ball. Trevino valued the sound of a compressed iron shot above all else. Then came survival and recovery. Sev and Chi-Chi could salvage a score from disaster. Trevino knew that golf was a game of misses, and those who could turn disaster into pair were magicians worthy of awe. Finally, there was grit and work ethic. Nicholas, Player, and Hogan were the diggers. Trevino had no patience for lazy talent. He revered those who treated golf as a job and worked harder than the competition. Notice what's missing from this list. Putting. None of these 7 are here primarily for their putting. While Nicholas and Player were legendary putters, Trevino praised their ball striking and will. This aligns with Trevino's own philosophy. He once admitted his advantage wasn't putting and that he wasn't even a great putter. Trevino believed ball striking was the true test of a golfer's worth. There's also a distinct bias toward the self-made. Hogan, Player, Rodriguez, Seve, and Trevino himself all came from humble backgrounds. Even Nicholas, though from a comfortable background, was respected for his work ethic. Trevino found it difficult to respect country club softness. He wanted to see the calluses on a player's hands. These 7 golfers represent more than just names on a list. They form a composite image of Trevino's own golfing soul. He revered Nicholas because he was the mountain that had to be climbed. He revered Snead because he made the impossible look effortless. He revered Hogan because he turned the dirt into gold. He revered Norman because he proved that the machine could be human. He revered Sevi because he proved that the human could be magic. He revered Chi-Chi because his hands could paint pictures in the air. And he revered Player because he never gave up. For Super Mex, respect was not a gift. It was a currency earned through blood, sweat, and the relentless pursuit of the perfect impact position. These 7 men were the billionaires of that currency. So which of these 7 do you think worked the hardest to earn Trevino's respect? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you learned something new about the Merry Mex today, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into golf history. Thanks for watching.